superfans are already going to buy the game.
So why are reviews written for them, by them, and basically about them?
A critical error is an error which the OS cannot reasonably ignore. Jake Steinberg is a streamer, writer, and certified yapper. Complimentary. Peter Hunt Szpytek is a YouTuber, journalist, and certified yapper. Derogatory. These are the things they cannot reasonably ignore.
Jake, it's the end of the year. Or rather, the year is winding down, which means that video game releases are winding up, brother. And right now it feels like we are in the midst of review season as so many different games are sort of launching in the holiday window. And so in reading a lot of these reviews, some things have, the more reviews you read, the more sort of like patterns you start to recognize. And the more that these sorts of things start to like jump out at you. And one of the things that seems to be a prevailing theme between a lot of the reviews I'm reading is the idea of who is a fan and who is the review for.
Right.
And what actually did it for me was the Silent Hill F reviews and sort of the response that a lot of people had to a 7 out of 10 review by IGN, where the reviewer said like the game is good, the story is good, the characters are good, all of these things are working really well in Silent Hill F. However, the combat doesn't quite stick the landing, and a lot of the review is sort of discussing the minute details of the combat and how it doesn't ultimately come together. I watched the review video of it. I was like, wow, this is a really well-reasoned review. 7 out of 10. Yeah, sounds like this guy generally recommends the game, but there are, a big part of this game is something that kind of doesn't really, really mesh well with the rest of it. And then there's this huge backlash to this review because the superfans have decided that this guy just didn't get it. That this guy just 100% didn't understand it. Because if you look at all the other reviews, it's like 8, 9s, 10s. People love this game. People really like this game. Which is funny because I even like in listening to the review, I was like, oh, this guy likes this game. It just isn't like this incredible review score. And I don't think we want to like necessarily wait into like review score discourse exactly, because at the end of the day, who cares? But it is a little bit more along the lines of like, who should be writing a review and who is a review for? And can those things be different depending on the different outlets and reviewers?
There are so many funny little things happening here, right? Because you're right. There's a lot of criticism of that review that I saw where it was like, doesn't this guy understand that this is like a teenage girl? Of course she's not going to be good at combat. And I was like, what are we doing? What are we doing? We're playing a video game. What's happening here? And then I think there's this almost instinct to be like, oh, the combat isn't good, but did the reviewer just miss that it's doing something interesting, that it's doing something weird? And from what I can tell based on the language of the review and looking at others, it's not the case. It's just general kind of like not great video game combat. So but there is this response to it, this way that we talk about the review, the way that it is interrogated by the people looking at it, where it is this, you don't get it because you're not a fan in the way that I am a fan. In the way that I understand this material, you are not on my level. So your opinion on it, your take, your perspective is actually less informed than mine is. And I see this with everything. To kind of even move off of Silent Hill with the recent Hollow Knight Silksong reviews, that VGC 3 out of 5 that everybody has such a big problem with, that I actually thought was a pretty well-reasoned review. And well written, and it is this funny thing where it's like, oh, this review for Silksong is critiquing the way in which difficulty is deployed, and that is minimized by this audience into, you are critiquing the difficulty. You are critiquing the fact that the game is difficult, which is not at all what that review is doing. Right. But again, similar perspective, where it is the player who is positioning themselves as somebody who gets why it is hard and how it is hard and how why that is good for this particular game, versus somebody who is like, you aren't acquainted with it to the level that I am. And I think we see this a lot. So I think ultimately we're kind of having this conversation today about one I think core tension, which I would say is, do we see reviews as they are written and who's writing them? Do we see them as a form of service journalism that helps fans specifically decide if a new game is worth it? Or as a kind of cultural writing in which we are articulating what a work means and how it fits into a larger landscape and how it treats its audience. I think that is the core tension, because I think if it's the former, then you want a veteran of the franchise, a fan of the franchise coming in here and speaking to those people. If it's the latter, then what you're doing is what limiting reviews to veterans and fans of the franchise does then is it actively sabotages this field and makes it inaccessible for people outside of that core niche.
It reminds me a lot of the conversation that we had literally in our first episode about Donkey Kong Bonanza, where like I'm not a huge Mario fan. I like a handful of Mario games, but like largely, it's not that I dislike them. I just don't play them that much. It's not my thing. But like every review I read of Donkey Kong Bonanza for the most part was like, I got to talk to you about Mario. And it's like, I am not that person. And so it was frustrating to read reviews that just automatically assumed that I was a super fan of Mario, because from the perspective it seemed to be from the people who are writing it, those people were super fans of Mario, which is all well and good. And I'm glad those reviews exist for those types of people. But it is frustrating when I am struggling to find a review that is actually about the game that it's talking about and not about the fandom or the community or the series as a whole. And now I do think it is worth pointing out that, like, hey, if a game is a part of a series, it's not a bad idea to talk about the series, right? Like, it would be wild to be like, this game, Silent Hill F, nothing else like it, because that's not true. It's intentionally a part of a series. Otherwise it would be called, Lady and Her Journey Through Horrors or whatever. But like, yeah, what was that?
That was great. That was good.
But like, so like, it's not to say that reviews shouldn't have context or provide any sort of context, but it is this problem where, like, if you are not a fan of something, or if you are coming at something where you're like, I want to know specifically about this game, it feels like too many reviews tend to be written from that perspective of the super fan, which, as someone who has worked at a publication, who's been handed reviews and been a part of the review selection process, a lot of the time it just comes down to who wants to review this game.
Of course.
Like the question of like, who wants to review this? Yeah.
That is, and I think that's such like an important thing to acknowledge here, that you and I both know that when the review codes come in, it's like somebody has to raise their hand and be like, I'll do this one most of the time. Or if you're a freelancer, you consider yourself maybe an authority or an expert in a particular game or franchise, and you are seeking out opportunities to review it.
Yeah, it's this thing, it's this push and pull where like sometimes you want to position yourself, like you said, as the expert, to be like, I am the Silent Hill guy, so I will be able to definitively tell you if this game is good or not, which you want that because that is based on the way the sort of review systems tend to work, is like that means you are much more likely to get that job, which I don't think it should. Because I just think that if you are someone who is serious, like if you're the person who's in charge of like handing out codes at whatever company, like I think you should be thinking about what is going to make for a really good review, and it's not always the person who's the like quote unquote most qualified to talk about a series.
Let me get your response to this. Is there a question of audience alignment in which the readers of reviews are seeking that the people that are seeking reviews are themselves fans? So a review by a peer fan, if you will, resonates because it matches their expectations?
I think it depends on the publication. This is not to throw shade at any publication. This is just to recognize the difference between sort of what different publications are trying to do. Right. Enthusiast media is a huge portion of the video game space. Right. And if you're not familiar, enthusiast media is a little different from like games journalism, because enthusiast media is largely exists for fans by fans, where people are just generally excited for stuff. And there's nothing wrong with consuming enthusiast media. It is not a lesser form of like journalism or whatever. It is just a different form of it. Because like, for example, again, this is not a slight at any of these publications, but usually if your publication name has like the name of a company in it, it's probably enthusiast media. So something like Nintendo Life, for example, or like Xbox Era, both owned by the same company. But like those are like for Xbox fans, for Nintendo fans. Yeah, you're gonna say something.
And I think something interesting that's happening there is that they're making they're communicating something about the perspective that they have, but also the implied perspective of the reader, the person that they are talking
Yes.
to. And
Yes.
I think what is there's a writer, Stanley Fish, and he has this series of essays, and there's one he has called The Authority of Interpretive Communities. And the idea is that he's arguing that meaning is not something that is inherent in a text. It is something that is created by readers who belong to an interpretive community. So these communities, they share common assumptions, they share common goals, they share it kind of like dictates what they're looking for and how they talk about stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that I see a lot here, just because it to kind of like make this clear to the listener, it's I think goes hand in hand with this it feels like Kingdom Hearts again. What does that mean?
What do you mean?
What does that
I see what you're saying. Like that's in the review. Yes.
Yeah. It
Yes.
feels like this thing that you know and I know. No elaboration necessary. It's like Mario Odyssey. What does that mean? What does that mean? And who are we talking to? You're making that meaning is created. The text is not creating the meaning, but it is signaling something to the reader that's like, you know what I'm talking. I know, you know, I know. And the meaning is in the middle, right?
Because it's by what metric, right? Like
Right.
Okay, it's like, you know, Kingdom Hearts, Mario Odyssey, whatever. Like, okay, great. Yeah. But like, when you say that, like in what way? And I think like, if you're going to say that in a review, which I don't think is wrong,
right? Okay.
I do think you need to back that up and elaborate. So many reviews love to say, and this has become like a meme among like gaming communities and stuff. Is like reviews always love to say return to form. It's a return to form. It's a return to form, which is short form for just saying like, yeah, it's more. It's just a standard. So you know, it's another one. And it is this happens irrespective of genre, right? So many Silent Hill F reviews say return to form. When Battlefield 6 comes out, I think next week or the week after, I guarantee you are going to get reviews that say it is a return to form, right?
Well, and you know what really gets under my skin about return to form, to be honest with you? It's like I almost think it's exactly what I'm trying to describe here. The assumption about who the reader is. That the reader,
what form?
What is form in this scenario?
Yeah.
What is like if pretend the return doesn't exist, it is Silent Hill in form. We must do something more with this.
It's also frustrating too because so like it's also worth saying this that we have not played Silent Hill F. I think it came out maybe today as we're recording this, but like if it did, it would be like 8 hours old. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like we've not had time to play it, so we can't say whether or not it is or isn't or whatever. But it's this thing where it's like, from what it seems like from the reviews that I have read here, it seems like it is largely not a return to form in how the game plays. It's a return to form, quote unquote, in terms of like it's a sort of personal story about like personal horrors and trauma, as Silent Hill has always sort of been. But when you say like, when I'm like looking at like footage of the game being played, I'm like, guys, this is not like Silent Hill.
Do you feel there is a degree
like it's not like Silent Hill? Yeah, what's that?
Do you feel there's a degree to which return to form is actually being used as shorthand in a lot of these scenarios, just to say the game is good and nothing more descriptive about the game, almost like GOTY contender? It's almost like we just don't know how to say game good.
Yeah, there are a lot of shorthand things that you will read in reviews. And like, I would like to point out, as someone who has written reviews before, like you can certainly call me on this because I am someone who is guilty of this, who has done this in the past. Do you know what I mean? Like I am in no way placing myself on a pedestal and being like, because I would never do this, because I have done this. But it's stuff that like, if I were to write a review now, I wouldn't do, because I'm working on like understanding to like figuring out how to use better expression and better language to discuss video games and things like that. Return to form, it reminds me of the like the word gameplay, in that it's an utterly meaningless idea. The gameplay is good is a completely meaningless sentence, because like what do you mean?
I feel this way about story because
Story,
I think
yeah.
the way we're interpreting both of these things is that it's as if there are parts of the game where gameplay stops, which is
Yep.
not true. And it's like, oh, there are parts of the game where the story stops, also not true.
Yeah.
So it's like trying to fit the language of video games into the language of like other mediums and being like, oh yeah, sometimes it's the story, which is the movie part, and then there's the video game part, which is the gameplay, which is just not true.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
like to me, there are all of these like things that people will say. It's the same word. Like we've thought about this a lot too, because we're writers, right? Like,
Sure.
there is a large section of people who write about games who maybe don't have like a ton of like formal training, because it is an industry that you don't need a degree to get into for the most part, right? Like largely like your work and your work ethic speaks for itself. And if you're trying to get hired and you're like, hey, I don't have a degree, but I have written a billion articles over the course of 3 years, like it doesn't really matter if you don't have a degree, if you can do the work, right? However, I do think that something happens when you maybe don't have formal writing training, where you maybe are a little less introspective about the way you are speaking and writing. So what I'm getting at is like, this is a perspective that I think comes from people who have spent a lot of time thinking about writing and thinking about words, and the way that a review is meant to function. And so like you end up finding these words and phrases that show up a lot that you're like, oh, I would not use this word because it's sort of meaningless.
And and there is something about the way that the games media apparatus operates that it almost encourages or demands that this is the person that shows up, right? Because you're not getting into games media for the money, and you're probably not. Yeah, and so the system there is like you almost have to get into writing about this because you have enthusiasm, which I think is going to invite a certain kind of enthusiast person in the media now, where
Yes.
I think a lot of people in games media are also super fans. And I just want to talk a little bit about what I think happens when you have this particular, maybe the pitfalls, the potential dangers of over relying on this particular perspective, because I do think that this is interesting. I think like, first off, something that I have noticed in a lot of the kind of like super fan communities that I am a part of or privy to is that the review becomes so insular. The things that are focused on, it's written for an audience that is already converted, an audience that has already bought in, that is not questioning why they're there or why any of this stuff is compelling to begin with. It is not about if the game can stand on its own. It's about if the game is on this bookshelf, if it like fits in.
Yeah.
I think that there's also a degree to which, and I think people might fight me on this, but I think that the superfan is much more prone to marketing capture than the non-superfan is, because I think like fans will love X is something that's like marketing. And there's a degree to which like the talking points are the things that are new, the things that are like the features that are,
Yeah.
we want people to talk about these things, and those are going to be the things that you're naturally drawn to. And I think that the review almost loses a sense of urgency, because it almost becomes more about what it means in the larger landscape. I'm when I'm having this conversation, by the way, I just, to let everybody in, I'm thinking largely about Pokemon. And I'm thinking of
Okay.
I'm thinking largely about like how Pokemon fans talk about Pokemon games.
Yeah.
And there's a degree to which it's like, I say that the review loses urgency because I know that every Pokemon fan is, the 90% of the Pokemon experience, which is largely the same from game to game, though the super fans would fight me, that they have already kind of bought in and it's unquestioned. And now it's about how all of these new features are affecting the thing that they've already decided that they like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, 100%. And like, this comes back to the question, and I don't know what the answer is, by the way. I think like I would be hard pressed to say like, this is what you do about this. Is like, so what do you do? Because that is important work, right? For fans of the series, whatever, you do want to have reviews that aren't like pretending like you've never played a Pokemon game or a Silent Hill game or a Battlefield game or whatever. Because like at a certain point, like there are things that we can all understand about what a game is that doesn't need to be touched on in a review. Like when I write a review, I sort of have this rule where I'm like, if you can get this information from a trailer, either don't say it or do not dwell on it, because it's like, if you already know this, why am I sort of wasting your time? You know what I mean?
Of
Or
course,
qualified in a way. Yeah.
there's a degree to which it's like it's you've said it a couple times, like Battlefield or whatever, and there is a degree to which I'm even something like Pokemon, for like a really long running series that shows up a lot, there is context that is invaluable. That if you are a super fan and you are reading a review for the new Pokemon game, I just had this experience reading the new Legends ZA previews. I'm
Mhm.
like, I can't believe the things that were, because I would consider myself somebody who's super informed about like the state of Pokemon.
Yeah.
There are things getting brought up in these previews, and I'm like, dog, this is old news. I'm so sorry. This is old.
Yeah,
I'm like,
we've known, we've known.
this ain't new. I'm sorry. But having that perspective, like, imagine the new Madden game comes out. You need somebody who has the context of last year's Madden, because that difference between noticing that change is what's really important, I think,
Yeah.
for assessing what that product is in a way.
Yes, because
Yeah.
it's exactly what you're saying of like the audience. Like, I have no numbers to back this up. This is based on a vibe, which is sketchy territory to enter in.
Sure.
But if I had to guess, most people who are buying Madden are not buying their first Madden this year. Some people are certainly going to be doing that, right? Of course. But like most people who play Madden, I think play year to year.
Right.
And so, yeah, should I be the one to review Madden? Someone who doesn't follow these games at all? Probably not. I think there is probably some value in me doing that, but I think that value is largely not marketable and
Well,
not helpful.
I think
to most people.
the value is completely separate from the game. The value becomes, I just want to read for the sake of reading what you have to say about the new Madden game. It's not
Yes.
necessarily in service of me buying the game or knowing anything particularly new about it. Which
Yeah,
I
because
think is
that's the question.
like
Yes.
which is so funny, right? Because then it becomes like, what is more important, your service to the game or your service to criticism? And
Mhm.
I'm thinking a lot now. I might be stealing this from Matthew Salesis, who's an essayist, so apologies. But I'm thinking a lot about insider craft versus outsider craft. And there's a degree to which, if you think about a super fan, they're bringing this highly specialized set of expectations. And the things that they're interested in are typically continuity, lore, and mechanical evolution. Whereas the outsider craft, which is more concerned with a casual or a new critic, is interested in if the work is standing independently. So they're thinking about accessibility, they're thinking about clarity, and I think they're thinking about like, there's a degree to which it is, oh man, what's the word I want? It's like they're more curious about certain things that like
Mhm.
the super fan has already accepted, and maybe they're a little bit more questioning and inquisitive, and I think that that's maybe just like a good starting point for any piece of criticism, because that's what it is, because the newcomer's tone is going to orient around confusion, discovery, and critique, whereas the superfan's tone is going to orient around continuity. And
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that like both are valid, but first off, I do think the degree to which games media kind of publishes the first one is kind of making people think that that orientation is the correct one or is the more valuable one.
Yeah.
Which is an issue, right? And I think when you think about just like criticism as an art, you really there's a degree to which the second one, the latter one, is more compelling or like a more standard starting place for critique.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that like something that is worth mentioning too, and I feel like this happens in every conversation that anyone has about like criticism in general, but specifically like games criticism, is like, it's important to find critics that you either align yourself if you're looking for like game like recommendations, right? Like, it's important to either find a critic that you align yourself with, or maybe just understand in general. So like if there's someone who doesn't like something, but you know that they tend to not like the things that you like, that person is useful for you for understanding criticism, right?
Right.
Because it's like, oh, well, if you don't like this, it means I probably will. Or to understand like, oh, the reasons you don't like this are like fair, and it's fine to not like those, but like I do like those for that reason, you know?
Right.
I talk a lot about like I really really don't like the Horizon series, not the car one, the redhead bow and
The
arrow.
Zero Dawn.
Yeah. One, like I really don't like those games, but I do think that I have a perspective on what I dislike about them, and I understand why people do. So, for example, like me saying I don't like Horizon, but if you like Horizon, give Forspoken a shot, because Forspoken I didn't like for all the same reasons I didn't like Horizon, but that means that I can pretty easily recommend that game to a Horizon fan because I identify that like it has all of these elements that I don't like about Horizon, but people really like those elements about Horizon. Does that make sense?
Oh, of course it makes sense. It's funny, I'm drawing the line between those games for the first time now, and I'm like,
It's
wow,
the
I
same
guess
game.
as somebody
Same
else
game.
that does not really like Horizon, it's funny how like these two games that to me, I'm like, damn, those are the same game. But they're like viewed completely, you know, one is on the highest shelf of prestige and the other one
Yes.
is not.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons for that, right?
Yeah, I
I
think so
think
too.
I think there was a pretty racist backlash to the main character there,
Sure.
which sucks, of course.
Yeah.
But like, I don't, obviously that was not a part of like the game's criticism like side of it.
Of course.
But I think that's also like a reason why I think a lot of like the gaming community kind of stayed away, not because of the racism, but maybe because it's like, well, you only ever hear like, oh, it's really bad, it's really bad, it's really bad, and like no one's like, do you sort of know what I mean?
Of
I don't know
course.
if this
Of
makes
course.
sense.
It totally makes sense. And I'm looking towards the future a little bit right now.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
I'm
yes,
thinking
please.
something that I'm really kind of just that is weighing heavy on my head and my heart is I'm thinking about Metroid Prime 4. I think
Yeah.
I think part of, at least this is something that I've seen. It came up most recently for me with like that new one of these like 2D ninja games that came out, one of those two that were
There
like kind of,
was.
yeah, one of those. And
Yeah.
I saw two people in games media kind of having like a little back and forth where, and I think maybe one of them was trying to say, you don't get it. This is hitting on something from the past of the franchise.
Yeah.
And something that I see sometimes is this, so part of what's going on, I think, when meaning is created between the text and the reader, is that the text is kind of dramatizing who the reader is and why their perspective is important. And I think something that
Mhm.
happens is that gatekeeping can become a part of this. Is that when you have
Yeah.
the super fan perspective is in the room, it becomes, well, part of the reason why you don't feel the way that I feel about this is that I simply understand this in a way that you couldn't. If you got, this happens all the time when I stream Xenoblade. It's like, Jake, if you only understood the lore the way that I did, you would feel differently about the way that the story is playing out in front of you, which is stupid. Which I just don't, I can't hear that. I just can't hear that as a critic.
Because it's like if it was important, then they should have told me. Or
and
you know what I mean? Like
it's there's so many things. There's so many things. And I just am I know that sometimes there is this bit of feedback where it's like, I always say that there's no required reading for art. I should be able to sit down and experience it and have a perfectly valid reaction to it. And this is something that's controversial. I'm sure even bringing it up now that there will be at least one comment on this video that's like, Jake, you're wrong. And then they give an example that I think is stupid, I guess. But getting away from my getting away from my point here is that I'm thinking about Metroid Prime 4. And I'm thinking about these reviews that are going to come out for this game. And I feel like every single person reviewing this game is going to be somebody that loves Metroid Prime. And this is one of these games that is situated. People have been waiting for it for such a long time that it is begging you in your review to say that it's a return to form. It's begging you to say that it's what the Metroid Prime fans want.
Yes.
It's begging you for all of these things. And Peter, I could not be less interested in the perspective of this person. Could not be less interested.
I am interested in your perspective, but if it is begging you to say that it's a return to form, that it's going to satisfy Metroid fans, then I am begging you, if you are going to write a review, to not say that. Because what does that mean? What does that mean? And it's fine to address the history of the series and to tell me whether or not it falls in line. It's fine. If that's your perspective on it, it's fine.
Let me tell you something. It is not fine. Let me tell you why. Because I can tell you right now, having not played the game, that Metroid fans are going to like it. I can promise you. Bet the house.
Yes.
Bet the house.
I agree. What I'm saying is like, I think context and criticism is valid. It is 100% valid. But the problem is, if the only thing a critic is able to do is provide context and not provide criticism, then it is, in my opinion, a kind of a worthless review. Because it's like, if it is just in Metroid, you play as Samus, series protagonist. I'm like, okay, I know.
Samus is back.
Yeah, because it reminds me.
You've already decided that you like Samus.
Yes. When that most recent trailer came out, maybe we said this because we streamed it at the direct. But I was like, I think this trailer looks bad.
Yeah,
I think this trailer is bad, and maybe not. If the game is different than this, it's not doing a good job in selling me what this game is.
Yeah,
and there was like a huge reaction, not necessarily to us, but like we were not the only people who watched the trailer and were like, yawn, bad. And then there was this sort of like backlash to that from Metroid fans saying, well, you just don't get it. And it's
and I think an extra part of that was the people complaining about this are people that already don't like Metroid and weren't gonna play it anyways. And I'm like,
right.
So you're telling me the only perspective you want is people that have already bought in, decided the game was good. What is going on here? What is this hug box? Are people so self-conscious about the things that they like that this is so what they need?
Well, it's this thing where like, this is a perspective that I can like understand, but not something that I am. Okay. Where like some people, it is true, and there's nothing wrong with this inherently, but it just is not the way I would ever engage with games as a form of art or criticism as an art form or whatever. But there is a certain type of person who does just want to read that Metroid is good or Silent Hill is good or Battlefield is good or whatever is good. That's it. And because they want a review to sort of be a part of the excitement of playing this game that they finally get to play. There is a type of person who wants that. Yes. For me, that's fine. I just kind of want nothing to do with that because I value criticism and I value like reading games as like a text and understanding them as these like works that are trying to tell me things. And for me, it just does not feel good to just read something that is like, you're going to like Metroid because you like Metroid. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's just not where I am going to draw any sort of interest from.
There is such a difference between creating a game that allows for a soaking up of the atmosphere, for a quiet observation. There's such a big difference between that game and one that justifies it. And I think that the superfan already feels it's justified because the word Metroid is on the title of the game.
Yeah.
But like somebody like me, I need the game to put me in a position and prompt me and make me go, I want to experience this thing that super fans have already been trained to experience. I saw a Blue Sky thread today that was talking about how they were surprised that Metroid Prime 2 and 3 had not come out on Switch before 4. But then they followed that up by saying, people are going to think that they're missing something, but they're actually not, because Metroid Prime 1 through 3 were its own thing, and 4 is kind of its own new thing.
Yeah.
And I didn't, that was actually news to me. That had not been communicated to me in the trailers for this game so far. I figured it was just, whatever happened at the end of 3, here we are. But I don't know. So it was this funny thing though, where I was like, so if we accept that 4 is this new thing,
can it not be reviewed as a new thing and be understood as its own sort of thing?
Yeah, with different goals and different things it's trying to accomplish and prompt.
Yeah. And like I think what is sort of compelling about that is that there is this dichotomy among super fans of things where they want it to be something bold and fresh and new, and also exactly what they had before, right? And
Wow.
that's not just Metroid. That's all games,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I'm thinking about Silent Hill F, right? Like,
Yeah.
it is like in the same breath. It is a completely new take on the way Silent Hill games play because of all of these different elements, from the combat to its setting to all of this stuff. But it's also exactly the same Silent Hill you've always known, and it's like, well, that's kind of I think there's something to that, and I think that
There's
a lot of
almost
games,
like a
I think a lot of reviews maybe didn't, at least the ones that I read, articulate that well enough for me to be able to get like how those two things collide and if they are colliding well or not. And the only review that actually sort of spoke to that was that IGN one that everyone was like, this is garbage, this is terrible, this is bad.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, I thought it was a pretty good review. Like, I got what this guy was going for.
Yeah, it's funny too. There is this, I think, in this super fan conversation, it's something else that is kind of occurring to me that's maybe a splinter of this, but is kind of the conversation surrounding remasters and remakes. I'm thinking about something that we didn't talk about on the pod, but we talked about a little bit between us, was the whatever that Metal Gear Solid game was that came out earlier this year. Delta, thank you. And kind of like the assumed position of someone who has already decided that they like that game and is now, you know what I mean? Like the person who dramatized. Yes.
I have such a hard time with like reviews for that game specifically, because I was interested, because I'm not a Metal Gear fan. I've never played them, but everyone sort of has said like, well, the reason they're remaking 3 is because it's a good entry point.
Right.
Because it's like, it's the first chronologically, and like it makes sense that you would remake this game. Great, awesome. But then that means for me, like, if I'm interested in potentially getting into Metal Gear, which I guess like my heart is open to Solid Snake and Liquid Snake or whatever. I really don't know. I couldn't tell you the difference between the two fellas. They look very similar, but I'm told they're not. If you are saying this is going to be a good entry point for newcomers to the series, like I watched like 3 video reviews of Delta, and like most of them have a line in there by the person who wrote the script saying like, Metal Gear Solid 3 is one of my favorite games of all time. And I'm like, okay, so this
which is
not
just shorthand for saying it's good. Like, it doesn't tell you anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't,
and so then it makes like reading the actual review of it a little frustrating, because I'm like, okay, can you empathize or put into perspective, if this is your favorite game of all time and this remake is basically just that again, like, but I don't think that those reviews did a particularly good job of telling me why it's good, other than just saying it is good because it was good before and it's still good. I'm like, okay, but please help me. Please help me.
You know what's crazy? That is one of the few games that I actually went into reviews being like, oh, I think I want to buy this game.
Me too. And then I just walked away being like, no.
I literally talked to my stream audience about that game. I was like, oh, I want to get into the Metal Gear franchise. This seems like the one. And I think that those reviews, because they were so almost monolithic in their perspective, that I think they actually pushed me away from the game. It turned it into me being like, all right, there's like nothing. I'm not getting anything enticing about this. I feel like it's this person taking a trip down memory lane because they just like really wanted to be the one to review this game because they had already decided it was important and special to them. And nope, not like, and sorry, you lost me. You lost me.
I think my problem too is that like, there's nothing wrong with being like the biggest fan of a game and reviewing it and reviewing the remake or the next one in the series or whatever. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that, as we've said before in this episode, like, there is a unique perspective that person brings to the table. But what I would argue is necessary is to bring any perspective to the table. And so often reviews, I feel like, are not bringing a perspective other than, I like Silent Hill, I like Metal Gear, I like what else? Pokemon, right?
Yeah.
And you don't need to prove that to me. I don't care. I don't care. Do you like this game, and why? And why? And
It's
it feels
funny,
like so many just aren't interested. Yeah, go ahead.
and so many of those kind of super fan pronouncements also work as apologies or explanations, if you prefer. Where
Yeah.
it's like this: I'm reviewing the new Pokemon game, and I'm giving it maybe a higher score than you might expect, and then there's like this little asterisk where it's like, but I like Pokemon. Maybe you don't like Pokemon, and it's like, what are we doing? Like, what are
Yeah.
we? You know what I mean? Just like, be you. Don't have this like this self-consciousness on the part of like, oh, but dear reader, I have already bought into this. Dude, there is nothing I would like more than to read a review for a Pokemon game that starts off with like somebody talking about being a Pokemon fan, like watching the trailers, thinking about like getting the content, and then maybe that content being like how that crescendos when you get the game. I feel like that's such a real perspective that we don't talk about.
Do you not think that that's what a lot of these reviews are?
No, because they're eschewing they're siloing being a Pokemon fan and being like a Pokemon video game fan. I'm telling you that being a Pokemon fan doesn't stop. It's like it's watching the Pokemon Presents. It's like seeing all the new announcements of the game leading up to it. It's like thinking about who's going to be on your team before the game comes out. These are all things that you inject into the game when you are playing it, but you don't talk about in a review. In a review, you silo it and you just talk about the game because you think that you're giving an authentic perspective to it. It's the same way. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and this is kind of like a weird comparison, but stay with me. It's the same way that we don't talk about how when you review a big 40, 50, 60 hour game, nobody in any review is ever going to talk about how they played that game in a way that is different from how every single consumer of that game is going to play it.
Yes.
Nobody talks about that. There is a siloing. There is so I find that to be,
It's interesting what you're talking about, like with the Pokemon thing, and then I want to talk about that second part because I do think that's important, and because as this video goes up, I believe Ghost of Yote reviews will be up, and which I have a perspective on as someone who's been playing it pre-release. What you're saying here is interesting, because like from what you're saying, like it would be cool to have a review that does like talk about like Pokemon, let's say, in this way. That is interesting because then that is the perspective of a super fan, but also from the perspective of like engaging with it in the way that fans engage with it.
Yeah,
And so like that's
you're dramatizing it. You're making it a whole perspective, not just like an assumed position.
And even though that might not be what I want as someone who just wants to know like how like does this game stick the landing or whatever, that is, I think, a better version of the super fan review of a enthusiast media review than just like I'm just going to recount the things that are in the trailer. You know,
when I reviewed the Teal Mask, the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet DLC, something that I noted was that I found the gameplay elements to be like almost laughably terrible. Like I hated the stuff that was introduced, but something that I thought was really compelling was that it introduced all of this Pokemon stuff. And the stuff was good. It was not good in the game, but it was the kind of thing where I was like, oh my God, this character is going to be used in all of this extended media. This design is like really cool. And like, I think there's like the ways in which this kind of like Pokemon fan community are going to take all of these things. I actually think the stuff in here is really nice. The game is bad, but I think that part of the dramatizing my enjoyment of these things is that conversation, is how I'm creating meaning out of the thing I'm consuming.
So this is interesting because for me, you know, we've spent a lot of time talking about like in this moment, like it's so frustrating to read these reviews that are written by fans for fans because it's like it doesn't really tell me much. And so like I guess my question to you is, do you think that these sorts of reviews that are by fans for fans, which ostensibly you have written, right?
Yeah.
That I'm sure I've written, you know, do you think that maybe just the way around it is to just be upfront right at the get-go about like, this is kind of the perspective I'm writing from?
A little bit. I think what it is a question of roundedness. It's a degree of which how strongly are you kind of drawing the border around the character, in this situation, the perspective of the reviewer talking about the game. And I think that like more than being direct, I want a window into how one is appreciating this thing. And oftentimes with everything, craft is a set of expectations. The ways in which we appreciate something and how we appreciate it and how we access it has nothing to do with what the game is doing. It actually has so much to do with what we are bringing to the game. And I think that no matter who you are, whether you're a super fan or a newcomer, if you draw that outline cleanly, if you present that to the reader, it makes a more compelling to read review. You become a more interesting character as a reviewer. And I think I learn more from your review.
Yeah, and I also, to your point here, like reflecting on this even further too, is like if you write a good review from any perspective, I do think it is worth reading. And I think the frustration for me is when I'm like reading what I would consider a bad review strictly from like a fan perspective, because I'm like, I'm not getting anything from this. Right. But if it was a good review from a fan perspective, I'm still like, I'm able to glean information and understand a little bit more about that game, or maybe it's, plays.
Something I was kind of proud of when my review for the Teal Mask went up was that it was kind of a more positive review in light of a lot of negative reviews, again, because the game stuff sucked. And I had a friend reach out to me and who is like a Pokemon super fan TM, as much as one can be. And they were like, you get why we love talking about this DLC. Yeah. And I was like, that's something. It's important to like, to recognize that, I think. And I think like the assumption of the position of the super fan is it just assumes too much, and it is communicated in shorthand, and it's communicated in signaling more than it's communicated in meaning.
Does this not push back a little bit on your sort of previous thoughts though about like art? You don't need to do homework, because essentially what to appreciate the things you're talking about, you do have to do
I love that you're asking this. Okay, so
do you know what I mean? Or maybe,
yes, I do.
Maybe
100%.
what you're actually getting is you got the homework for you to appreciate about another thing later down the line.
So here's what it is. In one case, the art in this scenario would actually be my review, not the game. So I'm giving you everything you need to appreciate the game. But now, am I saying you need everything that I have to appreciate the game? Not at all. I'm saying that we all have a set of expectations that we bring to everything. And part of the role of the critic is to kind of know and understand what you're bringing to the material and how you are interpreting it, because the meaning is not just in the text. The meaning is between the text and the reader. That's why there's like this whole thing when you write a book, it's like it's out of your hands and now it's in the hands of the audience and they get to decide what it means. And I think that like people are maybe just unfamiliar with these concepts, or they put too much value on video games are very driven by lore, Easter eggs, the secrets. Like people love this kind of stuff in video games in specific. And I think people maybe put a lot of weight on intention when it comes to art. They come like a lot of weight on why the game was, and like to understand why Masahiro Sakurai designed a character this way is to appreciate it, is to have the correct answer. And I think that that's kind of like something that I really push back against on the super fan, because the super fan is assuming that they have a lot of correct answers, and that stops them from being more investigative,
engaging with what it's actually saying, as opposed to just like
how it's affecting them.
Yes. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. And like, I think that it is a complicated thing that is sort of multifaceted. So it's not like there's one way to view it and that's it, But if I could talk about like Ghosts of Yotei for just a second, I think by the time, like, I'll make sure that this goes up post embargo, because I also don't know specifically what I'm allowed to talk about. I'm not reviewing the game. I'm playing it for guides purposes. So I'm not going to like give you a review of it exactly, but there is something interesting in playing it that I'm going to be really curious to see how people review this thing, because Ghost of Tsushima is, in my opinion, an excellent game. It's an excellent video game. And I think I am able to identify now, having played Ghost of Yotei, specifically what makes that game so good and feel so strong to me, because I think Ghost of Yotei kind of fumbles a lot of those elements. That's not to say it's a bad game, but that there are pieces of it that I feel like just don't come together to work in the same way that Ghost of Tsushima does. Specifically surrounding characters and motivation and
Right.
conflict.
Mm.
And I think that after playing Ghost of Yotei, I'm sort of this perspective that, like, wait a second, maybe Ghost of Tsushima was an average to above average open world game that was tied together and carried very strongly and heavily by an excellent performance and excellent writing, the character writing. And if you take those away, which that is generally kind of how I feel what Ghost of Yotei did, now I'm left with just an average to above average open world game. And that's not the right perspective, right? There is no right perspective. Someone might be able to read this and say, oh, I think Atsu is an even better character than Jin Sakai. And that's a fine perspective if they're able to back it up and explain what they mean. But me playing this, I'm like, I think most, it's difficult because I'm only one perspective, but I'm like, I think most people are going to play this and be like, oh, this is kind of missing the things that Ghost of Tsushima had.
Well, I'm so curious to see. Yeah, please.
That's the question.
Yeah.
Is the ability to sort of like recognize what is actually going on in a game going to supersede the fandom that surrounds, oh my gosh, I've waited 5 years for the sequel to Ghost of Tsushima, you know?
And I think it's also fighting this sense of generosity that people sometimes bring to first party prestige experiences. This like, this is the next big game from Sony, and they bring an enthusiasm to that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that's not to say it's a bad game. Like I said, like I think it's a probably what I would say like a pretty good open world game. Like I'd recommend it if you're a fan of open world games. Play this before you play Horizon. Play this before you play Forspoken.
I think I'm gonna like it quite a bit. I think I'm gonna like it even more in 2026 when the Legends, the co-op DLC. Oh, I can't wait for that. That's gonna be fun.
But it's this thing where it's like I do like it quite a bit. But I think that it is lacking a lot of the things that made Ghost of Tsushima excellent.
Cool.
And then but the question for me is like, okay, on the eve of the embargo lifting and of people being able to discuss this game in a review context, I'm really curious if people are only going to approach this from the perspective of I'm a Ghost of Tsushima super fan. Because also when you think about the people who get assigned games at publications, it is usually these like first party Sony games. This is not going to a freelancer. This is going to editor in chief.
Sure.
This is going to reviews editor person because of the way that sort of the hierarchy here works. And usually the people who are who are assigning the review are being like, hey, editor in chief, are you a big Ghost of Tsushima fan? And because the Ghost of Tsushima is excellent, and because they're an editor in chief at a video game website, they're like, yes, I have played it and I like it a lot. You know, of course that's a generalization, but it's complicated.
It is.
Do you think so? So to round this out, if I may,
yeah, please.
What is the solution? Is it just that people should be upfront about their perspective at the beginning of writing a review? Is it that we just need to hold reviews to a higher standard, or to say like, this is enthusiast media, this is a review, and understand that in the writing process? What do we do?
Here's my take.
Please.
Sometimes when I stream Xenoblade, some stuff will come up, like a bit of a hot, controversial topic. Like sometimes I'll talk about feminism, and I realize I'm talking about feminist art, feminist theory, feminist literature, media in a way that is informed by reading that I have done outside of the game. I'm not going off of vibes. I'm not just talking about feminism because I want to talk about Xenoblade and that's a part of this game. I think that to be a well-rounded person, you have to be interested in the form and the thing that you are talking about outside of the thing that you are there for. Yeah. And I think something with criticism that I come back to a lot is that if you are going to be somebody who wants to be a critic, a video game critic, or is acting as a critic, I would hope and I would think you would get a lot out of investigating and being interested in criticism when it's not about video games. And I think you would stand a lot to learn a lot about the form, about what strategies, the ways in which people have written about it. I think that there is so much to uncover and become interested in and experience this true ecstasy of discovery when you realize that there's a way, to a lens to bring, all of these other, like all of these aspects of how to do this job, I think it would be really fulfilling for people that do it. And I think enthusiasm has to be there to get you through the door. But the more, you know what I mean? If you want to flex, if you want to work that muscle, if you want to get better at it, if you want to get stronger at it, if you want to ground your perspective in something more interesting and more important than being the number one super fan, you kind of owe it to yourself to do this kind of work.
Yeah, no, I completely agree that there is work to be done that does not revolve around fandom in order to be a good critic. Right. Yeah, I would agree. And I think that'll make you a better reviewer.
Now,
Jake,
yes,
please.
Each and every week, we prepare a written piece. And I, of course, am so excited to share that with you today. But before we get to that, we have patrons. We have patrons that go over to patreon.com/critical error. And they decide, they go, oh, I'm going to give them $5 because I want desperately, I'm on my hands and knees. I need the bonus pod that they release every single week alongside the main podcast. That gives me pretty much double my podcast content every single week. We get a little emotional. We get a little vulnerable. We get a little honest. We fight sometimes.
Yeah, we did get in a knife fight 3. It was digital, so it's like kind of
have to go back.
You know, I think it was 3 weeks ago we got into a digital knife fight. Which,
but then there's a no, we can't spoil the knife fight. They have to pay $5 if they want to go.
I'm not going to say anything about the knife fight. But yeah, if you are listening to this right now and you're like, dang, I want to hear more of these guys, more than just the more buttoned up conversations they have on the main episodes, patreon.com/critical error. It'll get you there for $5, becoming part of the Critical Error Nation. That said, there is another tier above it for the Critical Error Royalty, whom we would like to thank right now. We have Connor Truelove, we have Andrew Bolkar, we have Danny Disaster, and Sam Cedar, whom we would like to honor with this sound effect.
Ooh, Connor Truelove, Andrew Bolkar, Danny Disaster, Sam Cedar. Jake is away on vacation. I don't know what I'm doing.
Wow.
Here's the thing. I'm away from home this week.
Yeah.
And I don't know how the sound effect is going to come together. So maybe I need to apologize for what just happened.
No, I think it is a piece of travel art. Do you know what I mean? Like that informs the perspective of where you are in your life and where, like, literally physically in your life, you know. I think that's cool. But I would like to say this though too. If you are unable to support us on patreon.com/critical error, if you want to just like this video, subscribe on YouTube, that's totally free. You're more than welcome to do that. That would mean a lot for us. Maybe share the video with a friend if you're like, whoa, I never thought about but games this way. Or maybe you're like, I knew every single thing they were going to say and I want to help my friend understand where I'm getting this from.
Goddamn. Love that.
Yeah.
And as we do every week, we're going to close out this pod with a little written piece. This was my week.
I'm excited.
My wife teased
heard on good authority from your wife.
She loved this one. Yeah, she liked this one. All right, so let's go. It's called the final slumber party. Okay.
Are we just like committed now to just like being really, really emotional and honest with these? I think we should be. I like it a lot.
I'm truly writing what I feel compelled to write.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
I like it. I like it a lot. Yeah. Read the final slumber party, please.
Let me ask you, dear listener, do you remember your last slumber party? Not the adult simulacrum where you drive in for a weekend, drag a duffel into the guest room, spend the next 48 hours pretending that your physical presence is not an intrusion on the routines of a recently married couple that has long since made peace with different bedtimes and mismatched morning alarms. I mean the genuine slumber party. The exposed, wired, too sugared, too late night delirium of the thing itself, the slumber party that was less about sleeping than about carving open time, hollowing out a bubble of hours so fragile and so perfect. That morning, when it came, felt like the betrayal of a parent flicking on the hallway light. I thought I had lost that forever. We all do, right? We grow up, we marry, we learn to ration our evenings, weigh the consequences of staying up too late against the responsible and brutal calculus of the day ahead. But then last week, I had a slumber party with my friend Peter.
Ah, yes.
We did not sprawl across sleeping bags in some paneled basement, and we didn't leave behind a nest of soda cans and peanut M&M wrappers, though God knows I thought of them. Instead, we logged into Borderlands 4. By midnight, the game had taken us by the hand. No, by the throat, and pulled us back into the bouncy house of boyhood. Two friends who should have known better, wide-eyed in the glow of our respective screens, trading stories while plundering bandits. The game offered up its endless carousel of guns, its shimmering chests of loot, and one hemisphere of my brain could idly weigh the virtues of fire rate against corrosion damage, while the other hemisphere, unguarded and unafraid, talked about life, about the state of things, about the horrors, about women we had loved or tried to love, and about our feelings. And feelings are, though you're not supposed to admit this, the key ingredient to a slumber party. Borderlands 4 would have you believe that it is nothing more than a hyper-masculine hallucination. Rippling muscles, grotesque violence, characters whose abrasiveness is their entire personality, a frat house with rocket launchers, but somewhere beneath the non-stop screaming, something else is happening. The women are powerful, the queer and non-binary characters claim center stage. Every NPC seems compelled to declare their horniness in a way that feels equally opportune and democratically mandated. The sheer gratuitousness of the violence has cleared out enough room. It has created a layer of protection for tenderness to bloom, an irony so sharp you can only accept it on faith. You enter for the guns, but you stay for the closeness. That night, I would not have been closer to Peter if we had been outside carving our names into cherry trees or burying our beer bottles in my dad's yard. When was the last time I did any of those things? When was the last peanut M&M, the last catch up and coffee with that particular old friend, the last conversation with a parent? Lasts do not announce themselves with trumpets. They end with the smallest of closures, and if you're not careful, one day you'll realize that you can't remember what slumber parties were even about anyways. But I can. At some insane hour, we found Claptrap in a dumpster. Just his eyeball piece, because he had been knocked around and taken apart by bullies. I reassembled his body piece by piece until he looked almost whole again. And when he begged for his final part, he told me, "Please, rookie, without my wheel, I am just a yellow toaster with depression." And in that moment, absurd and tender, I thought, this is the slumber party. To be ridiculous and sad, together in the smallest hours of the night, to laugh until you almost cry, to share something you didn't know you were going to share, to let yourself be stupid and vulnerable. The next morning, I got up a little later than I normally would, and I told my wife, I had a slumber party last night. The end.
Oh, Jake, I'm so happy that this is what you wrote about this week. What a lovely thing. Yeah, man, this was so fun. So for context, I know you were pretty clear about it in the essay, but we played Borderlands 4 until like you're an hour ahead of me. So I think it was probably until like 2 a.m. for you, and like 1 a.m. for me. And the last, I want to say 30, 45 minutes, we were just at the end of a mission, literally just doing that thing where like I was just like running along railings back and forth. Like we weren't playing the game. We were just like chatting and just like giggling and kicking our feet a little bit. And it was so lovely because it's exactly what you said. It was a slumber party. It was like we were up too late. I don't know about you. I did not have any lights on. I was in no lights. I was completely in the dark, just the TV glow. And it's so interesting the way that like games do provide this level of closeness that sometimes you forget about, because you know, we can certainly sit down and play Borderlands and do whatever, of course, like great, fine. But like the way it felt was I felt like a boy. Do you know what I mean? Like this thing. Yeah, I loved that. I loved that so much.
The power of pretense, the power of we're here to play this game, and then that kind of gets us in.
Yeah.
But we don't have to be like, oh, I'm not calling you on the phone to have an emotional conversation. I'm calling you to play. Yeah, it's funny how empowering that is.
And that's something too that like we got to do, and maybe this is because we have opened up so much in our bonus episodes
right
recently, but like in just like talking to you while we're playing this game, there's this like safety of it. And I think maybe it's what you like recognize here too, is that like because the game is so over the top and macho, or it is and it isn't, right?
Yeah, but
because there is this like level of goofiness, it's almost like speaking about these things is safe because there's like a kind of like thing going on with it. It was lovely. I have thought about it. I've thought about it since.
Me too. Obviously, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I was just so compelled by this, and it's one of these things where sometimes it comes up with like my normal friends, like, oh, I play video games, and they're like, oh, this is a complete like. How do you tell somebody that this is something you like about video games?
It is impossible.
Yeah,
it is impossible to communicate because like similarly, like what you're talking about, like I think like my parents. Like my parents know what my job is, but like I think they maybe struggle to understand the depth of it, maybe, or like the depth of like what games can kind of mean to a person. And of course they understand some of it, right? But like conveying, this thing about like, no, but like it also turns you into a kid again, and not just because you're doing a hobby that is largely associated with children, you know, less over time, but like. You know, video games are oftentimes seen as childish, but it's like not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like this experience felt like I was, 12 at a friend's house for a sleepover.
It's one of those things where just kind of bringing it back to reviews before we close out.
Yeah.
There's a degree to which I wish like reviews had stuff like this sometimes about like real life, about like the how that comes in and how that painted the experience for the reviewer. There was a I come back to this all the time. There's a review on Kotaku for Destiny 2 written by Kirk Hamilton. And he talks about kind of like trying to do this raid with his group of friends, and it just felt so real to me. I've really like understood his perspective in that piece more than I did like any kind of fake perspective of like this video game in a vacuum, kind of running the numbers on it. Yeah,
because it's literally like, this is what it was like to play this, and this is what it will be like when you play this, because you also have friends who don't want to, or reminds me, I just love anytime, pretty much like, here's how if you're a writer and you want me to really like your piece, just talk about your life and how your life pertains to video games. This is how it is. There's a great piece on digital trends from Gio Colantonio, friend of the pod, where he wrote about Elden Ring and sort of grieving the loss of a friend through Elden Ring, and there's something to it that really kind of spoke to me and really stuck with me, that where like I think about it now still, because even though I don't have that perspective, there is this level of like video games are like about more than just sitting down and playing them. That sounds so like pretentious or whatever, but it's so true.
No, it is true. Cool.
Well,
hey, as always, thanks for listening, everybody. We will see you next week with another episode and another bonus pod. Again, if you're interested in that, Critical Error patreon.com/Critical Error, $5 and up bonus pod, $10 and up name on the show. Anything else, Peter?
Subscribe on YouTube.
Everybody that's watching.
Friend.
Come on.
See you next time. Bye.